And we are live. All right. Hello, those of you out there in the world. Inevitably, we're 2 minutes behind. The current visual resolution is not optimal. Whatever. Don't care. I'll figure that out one day. But today is not that day for figuring it out. At 7 o'clock on the dot, we are going to do this for real. Bum, 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 bum.
Yay!
I know. And then, of course, actually, you know what? They are behind us. So you know what? Let's start now. We'll pretend it's already 7 o'clock. We are speaking to you from the past, or is it the future? Hi, I'm Noah Nelson, and welcome to Everything Immersive, our weekly live stream where the team from NoPersinium.com and the Everything Immersive group on Facebook gets together and talks about the things that are inspiring us and driving us nuts inside the immersive universe every week. This week on the show, right above me is Catherine Yu, our erstwhile executive editor and a new transplant to Los Angeles from LA. Over here, I got to get this right because it's mirror imaging, is Blake, who's coming to us from New York City, who is our new New York City editor. And in the always resizing window next to me is Cheyenne, who's also part of the New York team, and everyone's got their topics, which they've armed themselves with. And this week, it turns out they all kind of are centering around the world of pop-up museums. It's because I picked the topic this week that Ricky Briganti had put into this past weekend's Everything Immersive This Week, which was a Forbes article about the Museum of Ice Cream having finished wrapped up its Series A funding round and pulling in, I believe, $40 million on a $200 million valuation. So we're going to jump right into business. Yeah, so this is from the Forbes article, and we will put that article into the stream in a second here, but on August 14th completed its first close of a 40 million Series A round at a $200 million valuation, led by consumer venture capital firms Elizabeth Street Ventures, Maywick Select Investment, and others. So they got a bunch of money, a whole lot of money, to launch what they are calling not only putting new museums of ice creams around, but it's a brand new company, which they're calling Figure 8. Some thoughts on that in a second. And they've got they feel they've got like a whole new category. They found a new name for what they do. That name is Experiums. So, because not a museum, not an experience, but a place where you experience things as an Experium. And let's go. Some disclosures. Members of our team in the past have worked for Museum of Ice Cream. None of the members here have had that relationship. Friend of the show, Melinda Lau. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. She's still with them at the moment. Creative Whisper Lodge. She is working there, which Catherine, when Melinda took that job, did your perception of the Museum of Ice Cream shift at all at that moment when you found that out? I'm just gonna get into it here.
I wanted to withhold judgment until I actually spoke to her about the project. And I mean, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's very clear as to what this is.
Okay.
It's a selfie museum. It's an Instagram factory.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess we're going to talk a lot about these things. And for those who don't know, Museum of Ice Cream showed up in 2016. In many ways, I think easily the first of its kind. Maybe there was some other stuff. I mean, there was some stuff here in LA, Think Tank did the Break Bread thing. But I think it was right around the same time that the Museum of Ice Cream was happening. And it popped up in the Meatpacking District in New York. And it sort of set the marketing world on fire. Was 29 rooms around before then, or was that the same year? Does anyone remember?
I'm literally Googling that right now.
I think they were a year or two ahead.
2017. was
But
20 rooms.
like 29 Rooms always has some sort of social issue theme, and they work not just with brands but also different visual and musical
Yeah.
artists. Whereas I don't see that happening with Museum of Ice Cream. I see it happening with some of the other selfie factories where it's maybe like an immersive art installation that's put together by 20, 30 different sculpture artists, or it's a mix of viewpoints and they don't try to necessarily like make it into this kind of like faceless blob. Like you can still point at which artists maybe worked on which parts and which brands sponsored which rooms. So there's like a slight difference there too.
Yeah.
It's weird that you describe it that way because that sort of de-individuation of the artists working within sort of the selfie factory space is one of the things that really bugged me just a week ago at Zero Space. How uncurated it felt, how kind of loose and mushy it all felt. You know, it settled for pretty. And when you've got kind of a point of view, you can get beyond pretty.
Yeah, from what I understand about their process at Museum of Ice Cream, at least in the early days, they were working with individual artists who were doing pieces, and there's other people who can really speak to that story. I don't have the data in front of me at the moment, but I know it does feel like since then they've been really kind of tightly on theme. I mean, I know they've got their own ice cream you buy there. They've got deals with Target. They're getting their ice cream onto shelves. There's very much a way in which
Don't forget the Sephora makeup palette.
The Sephora makeup palette. There's a whole level where this is like about there's some very savvy brand building being done here, and there's kind of a whole line about. I mean, people mock this form pretty readily. I mean, I don't know. Like, what has anyone ever been to one of these and really enjoyed themselves? I say that with the. It sounds like I'm assuming no. Like, but I'm asking the question, and I'll share my own. But like, has anyone ever been to one and been like, yeah, this is great?
I mean, I have, but I want to hear from Blake and Cheyenne first.
I've been to something adjacent personally, and I went to one really strange free one that was meant to boost, I think it was the social presence and tenor of the social conversation surrounding Costa Rica. They had a pop-up at Chelsea Market, and that one was very slapdash, so it felt kind of like, oh, I'm not really sure, am I getting kind of the full Selfie Factory experience here? So I don't feel qualified to sort of fully judge, but no, I think there's definitely a lot you could do with the form, just thinking about it. I'm just not sure who's doing it or if they've done it.
Cheyenne, what about you?
Well, for like, was it Costa? Because I remember, I think that was right after you and I did.
Well, it might not have been Costa Rica. What was it?
It was the Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. Sorry.
So see how well
we're gonna get letters on that. So no.
Yeah. Very savvy way to read out the conversation, but no, I haven't. I don't use social media, so taking selfies is not really something I do very often. But I mean, part of me wants to go just gawk at what they look like, but I haven't made it out yet.
Oh, and that's the interesting thing that you don't use social media, so you see no utility in going, and that reminds me of when the 14th Factory was here in LA, which now I'm blanking on when that was here. That was a few years ago, maybe even around the same time. So in the 14th Factory, I think maybe even close to the same time that the Museum of Ice Cream first popped up in LA. When 14th Factory was here, that was very much, talking in the same language to some degree. It was a gallery set up. There were some experiential pieces. And I remember and some durational experiential pieces. And indeed, there were a couple of spots, like there was a kind of a recreation of a room from 2001, the Kubrick film. And then there was this room where there were a bunch of pitchforks hanging from the ceiling. And pretty much as soon as those rooms showed up, like there'd just be lines, you go in, there'd just be lines of people lining up to go into that room and take the exact same photograph. And that was sort of how I was introduced to it. Other art there, like some really beautiful art. And they tried to make it like a space where, things were happening. And there was one night where they brought in a bunch of artists to kind of riff inside the space. And I just remember watching these two young people ignore the dance production that was going on, that was only going to happen once. It was like a totally ephemeral thing. It wound up happening twice, but it was supposed to be a totally ephemeral thing being done by one of the best, dance theater artists in Los Angeles with a bunch of really great performers. And they were almost annoyed that the dance was going on because it was getting in the way of them getting the perfect picture for Instagram of the swing set that was there in the middle of this gallery in this lawn. And I watched them. They must have taken 100 photographs on their phone and were just constantly looking. No, not that one. Let's get another one. Just like they were having a mini photo shoot. And they had paid extra money that day to be there. They paid like an extra $40 to be in on that day because of the art, the performances that were taking place. And it kind of felt like they were just like, oh, this is our one day to do it. So they just paid the extra money and they were hell bent on getting that photo. Catherine, you said you've been to one that you enjoyed.
Yes. So the Color Factory in New York is different from a lot of these in that this is only their second go at it. And they commissioned completely brand new art from only New York artists. So like Jameson Pollan has work in it, record covers, Tamara Shopson has work in it. They had some poets write poetry. And what's really interesting is it does feel site specific. So the blue that they use, they're inspired by scaffolding on the sidewalk, the yellow of the taxi cab, the gray of the cement on the sidewalk. And they're like, not everything there is New York themed, but enough of it is that it doesn't feel like it's cookie cutter. The thing that I did like was I was there with some friends. I had colleagues visiting from out of the country, and they wanted to do something weird and New York, and they were using social media to communicate with everyone back home because they were on this business trip to another country. And I don't think country has anything like this. So they were just kind of tickled pink at the idea of a museum about colors where you could touch things and you could eat things and you could play around with your friends. The really clever thing that they do there is they issue you a plastic card with a QR code on it. So you don't need to have your phone out. They have photo booths and cameras on timers that are in each of the rooms. So all you do is you scan the QR code and then you get all 6, 7 of your friends together and then they email you the pictures right away. So it's less of that like mediated, I have to get this one selfie for me and like I'm only interacting with my 1 or 2 friends. Like we actually ended up talking to some of the people that we were going through with, playing with some of the kids. That's another thing, right? Like kids love this stuff. If a traditional museum is not accessible because it's not tactile and you can't get close to the art, like these places are stroller friendly, they're wheelchair friendly, you can take as long as you want, there's usually places to sit. And if you don't think it's like that great of quote unquote art, you have to remember, right, that like how much art is there in public education these days? Like we probably all took way more art in elementary and junior high and high school than a lot of people have now. So this might be their only way to like really access art in a context that doesn't feel quite as alienating as like trying to go to a proper museum.
Well, it's when you say proper museum, the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is, have any of you been to the Hirshhorn in DC?
I tried to go, the line was way too long.
So the Hirshhorn does a lot of kind of really interesting installation art that I feel ends up turning it kind of into the artsy selfie factory for the DC area because everyone always wants to come to get a photo with it. The big exhibit I remember seeing was a Scandinavian artist, Ragnar Kjartansson, who did nothing but a whole floor of like really crazy and varied installations, set dressings of the Alps that you could pose like climbing. He had a whole room done up like a nightclub with a projector of him as like a Bobby Darin-esque crooner. It was
Oh, that's
like
giving me
just room after room of this stuff. And all of it had really good artistic intent, but it had that tactile element where you could engage with it, you could insert yourself into it and access
that's
it.
giving me a flashback to seeing a Matthew Barney exhibit at the SF MoMA, and there was a whole floor that was all about whaling. And so there was like reconstructed, like a resin cast of a whaling deck that had like deteriorated. And then there was a resin cast of this, basically a whale hairball. That was there like on the floor of the museum, and I just started cracking up with laughter because like Matthew Barney had taken the equivalent of a whale hairball, cast it in resin, and then put it on a museum floor and called it art. And I'm just like, and gotten tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. And I was just like, you beautiful weird man, you, like, this is fantastic. And I mean, it's art as spectacle, right? That's something that I think it's something that as Americans in particular, we have trouble with because art sort of like, pop culture's here and art's here and the two can't meet. And so when you get, pop art as spectacle or art as spectacle, suddenly you're like all, no. Art's over there. It's not right here. It's not with us. And, other than 14th Factory, the first time I went to one of these things where it was expressly what it was, and particularly that sort of borrowed elements of the Museum of Ice Cream format, that was Candytopia, where a lot of it was the expression of one artist, which I think kind of helps with the unity of what was going on. Very strongly around, like this is this one person's drive, and then there was the marshmallow pit, which replaced the sprinkle pit, and it just became, it was pure joy, and I was running around playing with people. And the longer I go, or I think about the time, when at IDS this past year, we had one of the after parties was at the San Francisco Museum of Ice Cream. And, we brought like the world's elite, experiential design people through.
Imagineers, VR,
like every, all this stuff. And, some people were into it and some people were, non-pulse. But everybody, I didn't, but everybody loved the sprinkle pool. Like, it was just like, oh, the sprinkle pool. And then people just hung out there for frickin' ever. And I think what makes this stuff work, and we got to push past, actually, maybe back into some of the business part of the story. What makes this thing work is they're playgrounds. They're spaces that let people play. They give you the excuse for that, and I think that's so. Actually, Kevin, there was a line in the Observer story that also heralded the valuation, right? And I think we can get into Experiums in a bit. Maybe we'll come back around to Experiums as a phrase, because I got some thoughts there. But read this Observer bit.
All right. So, headline: The Museum of Ice Cream's $200 million valuation represents a bleak future. That's the exact headline.
So this is a fan. Got it.
Yes. And they talk about, the valuation, the deal, and figure eight. And then at the very end, kind of the writer wraps it up. The Museum of Ice Cream leapfrogs all this by proposing that museums don't have to be sites of intellectual challenge, spiritual inquiry, or even mild discomfort. A museum can just be a brightly lit room offering nothing, and people will still show up to see what the fuss is about. That, unfortunately, is the future. Oof, tough.
Extra harsh. There's a bit in the Forbes piece about how retailers are constantly looking for ways to reimagine the IRL visitor experience while battling the disappearance of the third place, that place where people spend time between home and work, such as the mall or a local cafe or bar. I mean, I actually feel like the sheer number of Starbucks in existence sort of say like third places aren't going away, but there is something to this idea of, you know, what role these spaces are filling. And I mean, that Observer piece, I think, pendulum things way too into the cynical for me, even for me, and I'm fairly cynical about some of this stuff. But there's the term they've come up with is Experium, right? Like it's this mashup term. Yeah. Well, and they've done something. They've decided to trademark it, which means that it's never going to take off because it can refer only to what they're making. And if you're going to make a category definition, you got to kind of like let that be to like other people to use. Like, you know, Disney did not trademark theme park, as I understand it, right? They trademarked Disneyland. You know, you can build a theme park, you just can't build a Disneyland. You can build a Dismaland, but you can't build a Disneyland. I can pretend you're at Disneyland. Weirdly enough, I don't think these things are going anywhere, which leads us to our next topic, which is the Museum of Future Experiences, since we're on museum time. Cheyenne, you went recently. You co-authored the review for us, for MOFI, as it's called.
Yes. Yeah. So just kind of another example of the term museum being used kind of loosely. So it's not a museum. It's an experience, and more specifically a VR experience. So I went with Allie, who's one of our other New York writers, and it's a very intimate experience. You wait in a waiting room. A guy in like a 70s sci-fi outfit asks you a bunch of questions about how you've been sleeping and kind of general psyche state, and then you answer a series of personal questions, very deep questions, like things about what you're afraid of and how much you want power and things like that. And it feels very personal. And then you are given two experiences that are supposed to be personalized depending on how you answered the questions. And these are probably 5-minute or so VR dream experiences. And Allie and I realized that we both got the same experience, and that kind of colored the rest of my perception of what we were seeing, because how likely is it that two of us who went, who are different people, who don't know each other very well, are going to experience the same two things? And then they have this collective experience, this group shared experience that we all see. And I just found it to be very tonally strange. It didn't match the rest of the museum. So, I mean, just bottom line, it was aesthetically very pleasing, really pretty. It's clear that they have a lot of money, which we'll come back to later. But for actual substance, just meaningless, which was sad, because they're obviously capable financially of doing better. But the actual art that was provided, aside from like the art of the physical space, was just nothing.
It fascinates me. Like when I read your review and when I read it in edit, like a part of me was like going like, whoa, this is not, the knives are out. This is a little harsh. And like, oh, I kind of feel bad for these like poor little indies making, and then just today you're like, oh yeah, they've got like VCAP money. I'm instantly just like, the switch went from like sympathetic to like, wait, no, what?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that that's part of why we were so harsh, because they had the capacity and the capability to do better, and they didn't. So, when you have that much money, you would think that they would be able to produce better art. And they pitch it as so meaningful. I mean, I was reading back the emails and the way that they pitched us this experience, and I think they described it as, yes, offering visitors a curated, cerebral experience blending immersive theater, psychology, and VR for an intimate exploration of individual and collective consciousness. Like that's a tall order. That's a lot to say. And
that is calling your shot and then some.
Right. Well, I mean, it was they pitched it to us as this, and the space is gorgeous and clearly like there's money behind this. And then just to be served a huge plate of nothing was such a letdown. And I don't think that I would have felt that way if it was in like a basement bush in Bushwick, you know, I mean, because I know that they're working with what they've got. But for this, they have so much and weren't really able to put their money where their mouth is. So
Did you have a chance to visit Technopolis in Brooklyn last winter?
no, I did not.
It was kind of a similar curated set of VR experiences, just without the framing device.
Mhm.
And I think that I had this weird feeling of like, oh my God, it's the Technopolis problem when I was reading your review. There's this kind of cyclical thing with a lot of curated VR, it seems, where it ends up coming across as sort of like Innovention's tech demo of like the art that's to come.
Yeah, I mean,
And like BAM, who puts on Technopolis, they're very clear. This is a family-friendly installation and interactive art festival with a bunch of different artists, some of whom are like pretty well known in the field. And it's meant to be like just a gallery, just like a bunch of stuff put together.
It's the buffet table. It's just like here, pick out what you want, And so while I wasn't like wild about all the art there, there was some of it that I like really dug. This, on the other hand, there is that level of promise, and that's kind of as you said, that's like the really frustrating element there.
right. I mean, they talked a big game, you know, and the tickets aren't cheap. I think they're what, like $50, and it's only an hour, and I think it ended up being slightly under an hour, although I can't exactly remember. So you're paying quite a bit for this thing that promises to really show you something about yourself, and then for it to show me that Allie and I are the same person, like it just seems untrue. And we asked how likely that was, and they 5%. But when we had to debrief and talk to the other participants, and all of us shared at least one experience. So I don't think that you can claim to be assessing the individual psyches of your participants and then not have a wide enough range of customized material to show them. I think it ends up feeling false.
Particularly because you can take the kind of work that they're taking and frame it differently and still make a compelling experience, right? Like it's always a danger to me when you start with a quiz. Like I have seen once in my career doing this, have I seen someone take a quiz and make the follow-up to a quiz compelling. And I've watched people fall on their faces on that so many times to where, like, for a while there in LA, it was a trope to have a quiz. And it was just, oh God, not another quiz. And if you saw the quiz, you kind of knew that it wasn't going anywhere and it wasn't going to create any great insight. And no matter what you said, it wasn't going to be used, maybe even ethically, but it definitely wasn't going to be used in a way that was interesting. And that was probably the greatest crime. It's like, it was just like, oh, you weren't going to get something. Blake,
I just kind of want more interesting quizzes. That, like the quiz itself is such a weird, like interesting, direct way of questioning you that, like you can use that format to build this sort of uncomfortable Voight-Kampff test scenario for the participant. It doesn't have to have a result. It just has to build into the piece somehow. And I think it's weird that all quizzes end up being sort of results driven as opposed to process driven when they get put into an immersive work.
Yeah.
I think where this went wrong though is that the quiz was meant to unlock this inner part of yourself that Mofi was going to show you, and then they didn't. So it's like what Noah's saying. It's having this quiz that promises to take you somewhere, and then it doesn't take you somewhere. And I can understand from a creator's point of view how hard it must be to to really customize the experience based on a quiz that you just got, but if you can't do it, don't use it. I think it's a tool that necessitates use.
Well, and I think there's something to the idea of like them saying, oh, this is going to reveal something about you and not necessarily about, your role in the world they've made. Like I keep on thinking about character creation in video games, and specifically that I always flash back, even though I never played it. I think it was like Ultima 3 or 4, where you did a tarot reading, and the tarot reading, the choices you made in the tarot reading defined who your character wound up being. So you took a little quiz, and the quiz was like, here's your character. This is your role in this world. By expressing this, you've chosen what you're going to play. And that's a lot different from someone saying, hey, I'm going to tell you something about you, right? Like there's a lack of playfulness. Speaking of playfulness, Michael Anderson says, amusingly, online quiz stuff seems to work well because it becomes easier to surprise and delight. And I think and that's the other thing, like everyone does love an online quiz, right? Like who doesn't want to find out, whether they're blue or
Pottermore worked for a reason.
Yeah. Are you blue or green milk, or, which Marvel hero are you, or which mashup of Marvel hero and Good Place character are you? Right. I think that one's a real one. If it's not, then I need it to be a real one. And like, fun, ridiculous, like, and back to a sense of play. Okay. We're about halfway through the show. Anything else on Mophie we should touch on before we smash on through to our next topic?
Just to say, I think this was only version 1, and so they are planning to do more stuff because this is a Y Combinator startup helmed by someone who used to work at Bridgewater Associates, a hedge fund. So they're definitely going to come back.
And I might just have you repeat that because like that got a little chopped up. In fact, I'm really worried about the strength of the stream. I don't know how much of this is making. This is a really good conversation, and I'm like, we got to find a better solution. You were saying it's a Y Combinator startup?
It's a Y Combinator startup. The CEO went to Harvard Business School. The CEO was also formerly of a hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. And from their communications with NoPro, this is one of whatever they're planning. Like they want these instances to spread across the country and world.
Well, I mean, in that way, they see themselves as kind of a competitor to the Museum of Ice Cream, at least the way that I was reading it. They want these pop-ups to happen, and, they want them to happen all over major metropolitan areas. So yeah. I think that it has potential. I think that it's not a bad idea. I think that the money is there. I just think that they really need to invest in the quality of their art.
I think that's something, it reminds me of something that our friend John Henningsen of Thymele Arts and Speakeasy Society was telling me earlier today, because I was working at a Thymele where we get free office space. Thank you, John. There's our half-hour ad. There's our sponsors. And he was telling me he went to Edinburgh. He was at the Fringe Festival for a week, and he said, I checked out the immersive stuff. Of the stuff I saw, none of it was immersive and none of it was good. And this is a problem. If we're definitely at the 80-20 space where like 20% of stuff is good and 80% of the stuff is not good. But like, you get enough of this stuff out there, and if the first thing that people encounter is a bad immersive experience, people will just be like, well, I'll never want to go to one of those things again. And then, you'll have people run away from the terms, almost to the point of like what Museum of Ice Cream is doing. Well, we're not a museum. We don't want to claim to be a museum because that's high art, and we're not an experience because, that can be anything. We're an experium. And, again, as for the form, it'll never catch on because they've trademarked it. There's something kind of brilliant about trademarking it in that no one else can abuse it. But this is the thing, like if the language needs to be used, and if like people don't have positive associations with it as a whole, it's actually number one reason why we fight for the I word and try and defend it against, all takers, because It needs to be called something. And I understand that some people are like, oh, that word's dead. But the next one will be dead. Or the next one after that. Like, sooner or later, you got to pick a line in the sand. All the money in the world can't fix a quality problem. Blake, let's talk about Showfields.
All the money in the world and a quality problem. Oh my God, talk about, I don't know their funding. I can't claim to know their funding, but you can smell the venture capital at Showfields. They are at the ritziest building. For those of you who I have not babbled to Showfields about yet because I'm obsessed with it, it is kind of selling itself as an immersive shopping mall. Floors 1 and 3 are just kind of heavily themed product displays, mostly for products with a web presence. Think a lot of Quip toothbrushes and Gem women's multivitamins, all the things you hear about on podcasts. And then behind the secret Book of the Month Club bookshelf in the Boodles Gin Lounge on the 3rd floor, you take a whimsical slide to the House of Showfields, their full immersive experience, theatrical piece thing that takes over the 2nd floor of the building that purports itself to be kind of a tour of this eccentric's house, but really is just like each room of a house featuring the products that would be in that room with a character ranging from kind of meh to eccentric, explaining that product to you. And it doesn't work on a lot of counts. I enjoyed my time there, but it's awkward when you're in that full immersive mode. It feels really like you're breaking the contract between actor and audience to be like, oh yes, I'm interested in this. Now what's the price on that? Now what's the shipping experience like?
See, this is why I'm fascinated. Like, you've mentioned this a couple of times that you enjoyed yourself while you were there. Like you went twice. You went twice. You have a love-hate relationship with this thing.
It's such a good concept is the problem. Retail is dying so quickly. You were talking about the third space, this need for someplace that wasn't home and wasn't work. And retail was that for years. It was the mall. And if there's a way to kind of buck up retail by making it interesting and fun and different and a break from reality, then wow, if you can get that, you are golden. This is going to work amazing. I think the problem here was, I almost want to say that it's a first draft. I think they could do awesome if they did some work with individual stores trying to give them the Showfields treatment. I think that they could do really well if they kind of tried to have a bit more of a narrative. The audience kind of had no way of being cast into this world. And so it's very strange to kind of be acted at when you're not really sure what your relation is to the situation.
But you're the shopper.
You're the shopper.
That's your role.
But then why am I at the house? You've invited me to your house. I said it should have been a Tupperware party. If they had made this a weird podcast Tupperware party in Salvador Dali's mansion, then I would have been like, hell yeah, I'm gonna buy some lotion.
No,
did you buy anything?
No, I didn't buy anything. Everything was.
Twice.
I went twice. I didn't buy anything. Everything was really expensive except the $5 Book of the Month Club trial. But I mean, there were a few products that I'm now considering for my place, and it does. That is the one success it has. It does go for a lot of these online kind of products that try to wear you down. I now know what a Quip toothbrush feels like after years of being told about them. And
Well,
so if it's just...
Oh,
Go ahead.
No, I'm just that's what's funny about it is I was talking to Ed Milcrease, one of our other New York writers, about it, and he was like, "Yeah, it was atrocious." And I was like, "Well, did you buy anything?" And he was like, "Yeah." He ended up buying a Quip toothbrush.
So what I'm hearing is
does it have
Quips
to
are
be
good.
if you buy something? I guess so. I guess so. Because same thing, he tried it and then ended up
Y'all,
buying it.
just so you know, if in the future an ad for Quip appears here during this part, okay, that's just the algorithm doing it. All right, it's not. We did not choose a Quip ad either here or here. Wait, but they let you try a toothbrush that has a head. Wait, so like, aren't
you can't brush your teeth
Oh.
with it. You can't brush your teeth with it, but you can pick it up. You can see the like cool little wall mount system it has with its
they have it at
case.
Target. They did that at Target.
They have it at
That's what's sort of fascinating to me is like I saw that at Target.
There's like one Target in Brooklyn, Noah. That's what you have to understand.
Wait, there's a place with only one Target, like a city with oh my god, how did you live, Catherine?
That's the other insane thing about it. It's that I think this also could work for very specific products, like all the edible things. Great. One of them was a women's multivitamin, so I'm not going to get it. The other one was a kind of smoothie powder that I just wasn't super into. But, those were a lot of fun, and those worked. And the idea that you were in the private kitchen of this rich eccentric, and her chef was going, "Oh, I've prepared these, try some," and she'll chop up one of these weird little protein cubes and go, "Do you want the mint one or the lemon one?" That is a situation that I could believe I was in, and might encourage me to want to repeat that. But then you've got things like, I forget what it was called. It was a prefab hotel room that they just stuck a hotel room in the gardens outside the house. So this whole set is supposed to be the gardens, except for this little kind of very IKEA-looking corner that's got, a bed and a shower and a toilet. And it's just like, yeah, we're going to be installing these all over the country. And I'm like, okay, can I buy one? Can I invest? And they're like, no, it's a concept store, And I keep going, okay, but, why are you telling me? I live in New York. You're installing these in New York. And they're like, it's here. And so...
You're going to be so sad for this.
No,
How much do you know, Catherine?
I'm
$9 million
for Showfields
for the whole store, not just the immersive floor, but business. The whole startup got $9 million, and they've spent 2 years trying to make the first store happen.
For how long did it run?
Well, House of Showfields is supposedly running for just the summer, but that's the specific narrative-ish that they've tied to just the second floor. The store itself is going to be open indefinitely, and I'm hoping that they do more runs of whatever the second floor becomes, because
you want to see it
I would
all.
love to see them keep trying this.
Let's meet Mr. Showfields. Let's meet the kids.
Mr. Showfields, the kids. I want to go to Showfields Academy. You could do...
Everyone's dressed up in wizarding words to go to Showfields Academy,
Space Station Showfields. Like, the possibilities are endless, and I'm kind of into it. It's more so just like it. Calling it the Plan 9 from outer space is like way too mean.
Oh, come on.
Because
yeah.
it's like it's not so bad it's good. It's more so weird that it's awesome, even though it's not very good.
That's even though you're saying it's not good, I'm making my reservation as soon as
Yeah.
I want to
No.
go.
I encourage everyone to go.
What do I have to lose?
It's free, it's interesting, you might find a toothbrush you like. It's better than retail. at the end of the day, I can't get too mad because it's still better than Target. I would rather try out my quip at House of Schofields than at Target. Just don't call it an immersive theater experience.
Hey, and I like Target. So again, if the Target ad appears, but then again, I don't know if that's high praise. Like I do like the mall. I mean, I'm of that generation that, enjoyed going to the mall. I window shop as a way of calming myself down at least 3 times a week. I hunt for certain things. Like it gets my, hunter gatherer instincts, flowing to like go, oh, the new Star Wars Black Series figures are out. So I'm going to go to like 3 Walgreens and 4 Targets, and then finally went up to the Disney store because they always have them. I could have just gone to the Disney store first, but it's not as much fun. So I go hunting instead.
Well, that's the really weird thing if like you're evaluating it as a mall. It's okay, this is going to sound like a total tangent, but have you ever heard there was this old amusement park that failed in like 6 months? The Wonderful World of Sid and Marty Krofft. It was a 70s amusement park.
Not only have I heard of it, but Dave Cobb, friend of the show, is obsessed with it. And once I let him know that it was referenced. But please, describe.
So it was based off the Sid and Marty Krofft weird 70s puppet shows. It apparently tried to do immersive theatrical elements. It would have live actors. It had a strange amount of mime. But the main reason I'm bringing it up now
That's the name of the episode, A Strange Amount of Mimes.
It was a linear amusement park, and you went there for like a 3-hour block, and you would go on all the rides sequentially as they took you from the top of the building to the bottom, and then you exited. There was not an opportunity to ride again. There was not an opportunity to explore once you had left an area. And, that kind of speaks to some of the dark ride immersive world that we're seeing today. But I don't think that's a great model for a shopping mall. You were saying that the fun of a shopping mall was lingering, kind of soaking it in, hunting around. But it does have this hybridized sandbox dark ride structure where, you start on floor 3, you go through kind of the light selfie factory light rooms that have been set up, very pretty stores that encourage you to take photos. They've got a big pillow pile to pose in, but you can also buy one of the pillows for $80, and each one has a different word on it. But then once you go down the stair, you go through 3 rooms down the slide. You've got 1 floor of sandbox that should take you 15 to 30 minutes to get through, and then you've got kind of a linear corridor of different kind of pop-up shops on the first floor. You can't get that lingering mall experience. You can't soak in the products or hunt for them.
They've thrown every idea at it. You said it, like selfie, like a selfie kind of garden, a sandbox floor, and then a dark ride. It's like sounds like someone like went to absolutely everything and was just like, let's put it all in. Put the kitchen sink. Are we selling kitchen sinks? Then yes, definitely put a kitchen sink in. Actually, were they selling
the kitchen sink?
Was for sale?
They have a kitchen sink, and it's filled with those. Michael Anderson calls them Orbeez, those little gel balls that soak up water and feel really nice that you use to water your plants. And so you can just like play with the Orbeez and pose with them for a photo.
Which thing are they selling?
Thousands of them filling up like an industrial kitchen sink.
Are they selling the Orbeez, or are those just there?
No, that one's more of a photo.
Why wouldn't they be selling the Orbeez? See, this is like, if you're gonna, it's like when I walk into Doc Ondar's in Galaxy's Edge, allegedly everything is for sale. Like, if you see it on the wall, you can buy it. It's just everything's really expensive. I don't know if that's true. That's the way the legend goes. But like, if you're gonna make something like this, be ready to sell the fixtures, right? Like, why not?
Well, that's the one really nice thing. There are some local artists that have like put up some art that ranges from okay to really nice, and all of the art fixtures either have a price tag on them that is out of everyone's budget, or for some of the custom work, like they've got one of those little I almost want to call them Lego geode walls, where they've
Mm,
knocked out part of the drywall and have a little Lego cavern built into it.
right.
That one they've got a here's the artist, call for a quote if you want this for your home or
Oh, that's
office.
fantastic.
And that's
Yeah, that's
nice.
really good.
But I would like to buy the Orbeez. I actually probably would have bought the Orbeez. I love those, and I've got some vases to fill.
So see, there you go. That's our practical advice for the folks at Showfields. Now we've talked a lot about stuff that's doing it wrong when it comes to the pop-ups, or kind of halfway there, or chasing money and missing the point. Catherine, you brought something to the table this time out, and I'll drop the link in the chat. Tell us about one you think that's doing it right.
Yeah. So there is a immersive art installation in Utah called Dreamscapes. It's put together by an arts alliance. And earlier this spring, they had a field trip. Specifically, they brought in a group of students who were deaf or blind. And so that kind of like tactile art really takes on this whole other meaning where, they can use these other senses to really engage with the art instead. And so that I thought was really great. It was the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind. They went to the exhibit called Dreamscapes, very similar to a lot of these other pop up art installations across the country, for 14,000 square feet, tons and tons of local artists and builders did it. But yeah, I just thought it was really inspiring to not from necessarily social media obsessed 20 something millennials that just want, to get a new profile pic, and to really think of this as a way to engage an audience who might not have been engaged otherwise. And what's really interesting is that the art show was specifically designed for people who are visually impaired or have hearing loss or even both. Like that, I thought was super cool.
I feel like maybe there's like nothing to add. Yeah, it's hearing about that reminded me a lot of. I mean, one, I instantly started thinking about Oho, which is Berkeley Lidge's amazing piece. That we'll talk about some other day. But it also made me think about. I was having a conversation with someone this week. I don't remember. Oh, that's what it was. Over the weekend, we went to the Institute for Art and Olfaction, which is, I don't want to say like it's a perfuming school in Los Angeles, but you could certainly, you could learn a lot in that field at that school. It's really about smell as a whole, like about the intersection of the sense of smell and art is what they encompass as a whole. And we went to, there's a kind of presentation / start of a workshop group around making smell-based immersive experiences that are going to like involve VR. And what was interesting was, talking about things like the Exploratorium in San Francisco, where, every single one of the senses, sight, sound, touch, except for smell, were being engaged there. And there's this broader universe of the senses that I think are often overlooked. And, the glory in some of these spaces that we go into, we're going to do a video for a space that's here in LA pretty soon, where there's one room where you're able to like, the artist has left behind like their favorite shapes, and you're in the form of these you 3-dimensional objects that you can like put on a wall with Velcro. And they've got these Velcro walls, and you can like recreate, you can make, temporary pieces of art using the artist's favorite shapes, Velcroing things on and off the walls. And it's a lot of fun, and it's fully participatory, and it's the kind of thing that, it isn't just about the visual, and it's something that someone can enjoy just the sheer, tactile part of what's going on in that. Or there's another space where there's an art piece that is a musical instrument, so you can make these tones with it. So I think part of it's just a function of like a lot of installation art is driven by the visual arts. Like that's where things begin. And so people don't necessarily think about what to do beyond the visual side.
That was one of my favorite rooms at Meow Wolf, is when you find, what is it, that mastodon skeleton? And there's no instructions, but you see these hammers and you're like, I wonder what these do. So it's like me and a bunch of other kids just being like, oh wait, it's an instrument. Oh, it's like a keyboard. What do? Oh, you hit the bone in a certain way, and then we're like playing this instrument and just having a lot of fun. And it was something that was discoverable. Wasn't like they were, but it did engage that other sense. And like, how often do you get to like hit something on purpose and not get in trouble for it?
It's the thing that kept popping into my mind when you were talking about that. Did you ever go on the revamped Journey into the Imagination they did at Disney, the most recent one at Epcot? And whenever I went on that one, it always, it goes, oh, we're going to explore your five senses. And I remember at the end, they kind of just go like, taste and touch. We don't have time for that. Bye.
Whoa, really?
It's so disappointing. It crushed me as a child because that was like what I was all about then. And smell, of course. Disney had perfected those little horrible spritzers that can give artificial skunk odor to you. And so, like that was fine, I guess. But yeah, I feel like there is this sort of acquiescence to like, it's just, taste and touch. Those are just going to be too hard, too many liabilities, too much weirdness with there. But that when someplace does kind of take that leap, you get great stuff. You get a lot of fun. There's a reason why all the selfie factories love to give you a snack at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like touch is something that installation's meant for children. I mean, if you take a kid to any kids museum or even like go to the zoo, you know those boxes where you can stick your hand and you can't see what's in there, but you can feel it. So it's like, this is a cheetah pelt feels like, or this is what a tarantula feels like. I think that there's definitely a need for that, and then they just stop using it as soon as you become an adult. So yeah, it would be very cool to see more immersive things where you can touch. And the House of Showfields, if you would call it successful, that's why it's successful, is because you're allowed to get that tactile feeling of, touching stuff on display.
Yeah, it feels like it comes back to that idea of like letting adults play, right? And sort of rescuing the act of play. I mean, when we think about, immersive theater, when we're, whether we're given like a heavy duty role like you would be in a LARP, or just a light kind of social role, you're still asked to play, right? It's one of the reasons why I like, still referring to these things as, oh, what are these? They're plays, because we're playing. And that one day, like, well, what do you call them? Immersives? Or this? It's like, they're plays. And
there's the book talk this Thursday. I mean, like, I have not to give kind of maybe to give a random plug, but there's the Fun Taste and Games book talk on the aesthetics of immersive that defines the aesthetic of immersive theater as play separate from the prevailing aesthetic of beauty applied to most other art.
Is that the book talk that Dave Thomas?
Oh, that's David Thomas.
Yeah, David Thomas is good. Yeah. Denver's own professor of fun, who hosted the Denver Immersive Retrospectacle, a recap article of which you can find on the website today, by the way. And so he's going to be in New York doing a book reading, right?
Yes, it's a book talk it's him in conversation with Parsons professor John Sharp, talking about immersive design and the emerging aesthetic of what is an immersive thing.
Fantastic. All right.
Awesome.
Got just a couple of minutes left to our appointed hour, so I wanted to reach in. We've got audience mailbag. We've actually got an actual question.
Boy.
Here we go.
Reader mail.
Reader mail, indeed. Let me get to the proper space. So this comes in from Mike LBC, and oh wait, oh I see you've dropped in a different one. This comes in. Oh wait, oh did it get removed? Wait, what? Where's the question thread? No, there it is. Okay, cool. In the question thread, which you put in the Slack, in the office hours channel of the NoPro Slack, here we go. Are immersive events that only give you the physical address the day of the show increasing the mystery and anticipation of the show, or annoyingly messing with travel and dinner plans? You can only pick one, fence sitters. All right, so let's start with Cheyenne. Since you already spoiled for us your answer in the Slack, why just share it with the rest of the group right now?
I'm sorry. I am definitely pro mystery location. I think it's exciting. Maybe it can be annoying, especially if the mystery location ends up being like Staten Island or something, but that typically doesn't happen. So overall, I like the anticipation of not knowing where you're going.
Blake.
I like to know a train stop at minimum. Tell me, where in town I'm going to be, and when I need to be there, and then say, it's going to be within 10 blocks of this train stop. Great. I can walk the rest of the way. But I find it annoying if it's just you're going to go somewhere, that's a level of trust I'm not always ready to do for a company that I know nothing about.
Catherine.
It's interesting to see this from the perspective of the New Yorkers and the Angelinos. In New York, are we assuming that it's somewhere in the 5 boroughs and reachable by
you
public
don't know
transit?
There's no assumptions.
See?
Like if it's a mystery and it's a full mystery, right? So like the way I'm interpreting this question is someone just saying New York the way people here say LA, and sometimes mean Whittier or Van Nuys or La Mirada,
Anaheim.
Yeah. They'll say in Los Angeles, and it's like, that's Irvine. This address is in Irvine. So that's the assumption.
It's technically a different county and state.
Yeah, I've seen it all.
So yeah, at least give me the broad strokes, West Side, downtown, somewhere in Chelsea. I'm fine with somewhere in Chelsea, but don't make it so that I have to end up taking 3 trains. Or surprise, it's Long Island or Jersey or something, like you were saying, Cheyenne. Like, if you really have to go to a show, let's say at work one day and it's at 7, and they spring upon you at 10 in the morning that you have to be somewhere in Staten Island where you have to take a train to a ferry to a bus and then walk, are you truly okay with that?
No, but I think that I feel like there's a general understanding that would be very uncool and unpopular. If you're selling
New York, but I think this question's coming from LA, where you can have it sprung upon you that it's in Santa Monica, but you actually work in like Orange County.
Well, and you guys have way worse traffic to contend with. I could see how it would be annoying, but I stand by my answer that it's more exciting for me to have a mystery location.
And I'll McLaughlin group this. The correct answer is you gotta give a zip code. At the very least, you give a zip code, you let people know the general area. It doesn't take more than that. You do not need to reveal the final thing, but give people a chance to have that night out, right? People, they may be coming from work. They may not have eaten, particularly if you've got something where they may have to be, putting on a different set of clothing. We get those notices like, oh, be prepared to get dirty. Give a zip code. If you live in a place where it's spread out enough that it's just one big zip code, wow, congratulations. Give that neighborhood. I've watched people say LA and mean Orange County, and also just I could see someone saying New York and it being Staten Island, and just give the basic breakdown, help people define their lives. Like there's an ask here of trust us or hand over everything to us, and it's such a big ask. I think if you're in a long running piece and you're pretty far down the road, or you're working, or if it's an audience where, you're six shows in and it's a closed set, and you really want to work people that way. All right. You're working people that way. Just know that's what you're doing, that's a work, it's not a neutral, thing to make that choice. And even then I would say, give the neighborhood, people aren't going to come along and try.
Do you like people being on time to your?
Yeah. That's the big one there.
I agreed. I don't. No, I was just. It was a bit of a tangent. No, I was just thinking. The one thing that always gets me is when it's one of these impossible to find shows, and then they have two people on the street in vaguely strange dress looking for someone who looks lost when they give you that mystery address.
Yeah. It can flip around and be the reverse and sort of wind up spoiling the fun. All right. That's it for us for this week. You can find everything we're doing. The whole team here is from No Proscenium, so check out noproscenium.com. In the chat log, there's links to all the reviews we talked about, the articles we talked about. We'll be back next week, trying to perfect this streaming technology as best we can. We are getting what we pay for as I chase everyone's windows. Next week, it is Everything Else, our pop culture show. And for one final time, we're talking Galaxy's Edge. We're going to be talking about all the books they made for Galaxy's Edge. And we got some special guests, including at least Jeff Heimbuch of Horror Buzz is going to come and join us to talk about that. And there might be some others we'll announce soon. That's it. Until next time, we will see you at the show. Then I hit end stream. And then I hit end.